Everyone rejected the weak Omega at the auction feast until the powerful Alpha King claimed her 175. The hall of the Northern Kingdom was alive with the sound of laughter, clinking goblets, and whispered secrets. Candles lined the towering pillars, casting flickering shadows across the faces of nobles who had gathered for the fabled auction feast. A night where power, bloodlines, and influence were displayed as openly as silver on a platter. Every corner of the hall seemed alive, glittering with jewels, silk, and pride. And yet in that brilliance, one figure barely seemed to exist. Seraphine entered the hall, her steps cautious, almost hesitant. She was small, with pale skin that seemed to glow faintly under the candlelight. Her hair, the color of ash, fell in soft waves around her shoulders, framing a face that betrayed fear, yet carried a strange, quiet strength. She was an Omega, a kind whispered about in court circles as weak, fragile, and cursed. Tonight the whispers clung to her like a second skin. No one will bid on her. No one wants her. The nobles' eyes swept over her like cold wind. Some sneered, some laughed, some merely ignored her presence entirely. Seraphine could feel their judgment pressing down, heavy and suffocating. She forced herself to keep her gaze lowered, but it was impossible to hide the tremor of her hands. She had prepared for humiliation, but the cruelty of such open rejection still cut deeper than she expected. The auctioneer, a tall man with a thin mustache and sharp eyes, stepped forward. His voice boomed, filling the hall. The next Omega brought forth for consideration. He paused, looking over Seraphine with a flicker of disdain. Weak, fragile, and untamed, who shall claim her? A silence fell, heavy and suffocating. The nobles murmured to one another, their whispers like knives. She is barely worth a glance. Why even bring her here? No one will bid. Seraphine's heart sank with every passing second. She had always known that her kind was undervalued, but nothing had prepared her for the raw, palpable rejection of the entire court. She tried to shrink into herself, to become invisible, but the eyes of dozens of nobles, glittering with scorn, seemed to trap her in place. Then, a sudden hush fell over the hall. The doors at the far end swung open, and a figure entered that seemed to pull the shadows toward him. King Caliph, the Alpha King of the Northern Kingdom, walked in with the confidence of a man who owned every inch of the world. His presence alone silenced the laughter and chatter. The nobles straightened, some out of fear, some out of awe. Caliph was tall and broad-shouldered, his dark eyes sharp as obsidian. His hair was like a river of night, falling in waves around his face, framing a jawline that could have been carved from stone. He wore a cloak of midnight blue, embroidered with silver sigils that marked him as a ruler of unmatched power. Every step he took echoed in the hall like a drumbeat of authority. The auctioneer hesitated, sensing the tension shift in the room. The nobles whispered urgently to one another, their voices a mix of excitement and fear. None dared meet Caliph's gaze. And then, in a voice that was both calm and terrifyingly commanding, Caliph spoke. "I claim her." The words cut through the hall like lightning. Every eye turned to Seraphine, who froze, her pulse pounding in her ears. She felt as if the world had stopped. Murmurs erupted, some filled with disbelief, others with shock. The Alpha King himself. The auctioneer's jaw dropped. "Why, your Majesty," he stammered. "Are you certain she is weak? She is barely." Caliph's eyes were sharp, unyielding, and they cut through the objections like steel. "I said I claim her." His voice left no room for argument. Seraphine's knees threatened to buckle. She had never imagined anyone, least of all the Alpha King, would notice her. She wanted to speak, to protest, but her voice had fled. All she could do was nod, her fingers trembling as they grazed the folds of her dress. Caliph stepped closer, his gaze never leaving hers. The room seemed to shrink around them, the chatter fading into a low hum. Seraphine felt a strange, shivering mixture of fear and awe. He was the most powerful man in the kingdom, feared by many, respected by all. And now he had chosen her. The nobles looked on, their expressions a mix of astonishment and envy. Some whispered of hidden motives, others of danger. To be claimed by Caliph was an honor few could imagine, and yet the Omega before him seemed so fragile, so undeserving. But Caliph's gaze never wavered. "Walk with me," he commanded, his voice softer now but still carrying that undeniable authority. Seraphine obeyed, each step feeling surreal. They moved through the hall, past the glittering tables and swirling nobles, toward the private chambers reserved for the king. With each step, the whispers grew louder behind them, yet she could hardly hear them over the rapid beating of her own heart. Once inside the private chambers, the atmosphere shifted. The walls were lined with dark wood and tapestries depicting the kingdom's victories, the flickering candlelight giving the room a warm, yet ominous glow. Caliph turned to her, his eyes studying her face as if he could see through every layer of doubt, fear, and insecurity. "You are different," he said almost to himself. "Not weak, not truly." Seraphine swallowed hard. I do not understand, your majesty," she whispered. Her voice was small, barely audible, yet it carried the tremor of her uncertainty. Caliph stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "You have strength, Seraphine, a strength they cannot see, and yet it calls to me." His words were heavy with meaning, and she felt a shiver run down her spine. For the first time in her life, someone looked at her and saw beyond the fragile exterior. Yet fear still gripped her. Why me? Why would the king choose someone like me? She wanted to flee, to disappear into the shadows of the palace. But there was something in Caliph's gaze, a promise of protection and understanding that rooted her in place. "Do not mistake my claim as charity," Caliph continued, his voice firm yet softer now. "I did not choose you because of pity. I chose you because you are necessary and because you are worth seeing." Seraphine's chest tightened. She wanted to believe him, yet her mind was a storm of doubt. Every insult, every rejection she had endured flashed before her eyes. But in that moment, she also felt a flicker of hope, a dangerous, fragile hope that perhaps her life was about to change forever. Caliph gestured toward a high-backed chair by the window. "Sit. We will speak, and you will learn what it means to be claimed by the Alpha King of the Northern Kingdom." She obeyed, settling into the chair, her fingers clutching the edges as if to anchor herself in reality. Caliph moved to stand beside the window, gazing out over the moonlit courtyard. His back was rigid, commanding, yet she sensed a depth beneath the surface, a shadow of loneliness, of burdens carried in silence. "You will need to learn our ways," he said quietly, almost as if speaking to himself. "The court will not be kind to you. They will try to break you or make you something you are not. Do not let them." Seraphine nodded, though her heart raced with uncertainty. "Can I survive this? Can I truly be more than what they say I am?" The candlelight flickered, and for a moment the room was bathed in shadows and gold. Caliph turned to her, his gaze intense. "Do you understand what it means, Seraphine, to be claimed? You are no longer merely an observer of life. You are part of this kingdom's pulse, its strength, and its dangers." Her lips parted, but no words came. All she could do was meet his gaze, feeling a strange mixture of fear and something else, something she could not name, a pull toward him she could not resist. Outside, the distant sounds of the feast continued, oblivious to the quiet storm brewing in the king's chambers. Inside, the air between them seemed electric, charged with possibilities and dangers neither could yet name. Then, as the night deepened, Caliph's voice broke the silence. "Sleep now, Seraphine. Tomorrow your lessons begin. And you will learn why no one has seen your worth until this very moment." Seraphine nodded, her thoughts a whirl of fear, excitement, and confusion. As she lay down in the soft bed prepared for her, she could not shake the feeling that her life had shifted forever. The palace, the king, the whispered powers within her, they were all part of a story she had only just begun to understand. And yet, a shadow lingered at the edges of her mind. Why did he choose me? And what dangers follow someone the Alpha King claims? As sleep threatened to claim her, one thought remained clear and unshakable. She was no longer invisible. And for better or worse, nothing would ever be the same again. The Northern Kingdom's palace was a fortress of black stone and silver spires that stretched toward the moonlit sky. Its halls were wide and cold, filled with echoes of power and secrets long buried. Seraphine walked cautiously through the corridors, her steps echoing softly on the polished marble. Every corner seemed alive with shadows, twisting and stretching as if watching her, judging her. She could feel the weight of her new life pressing down. She had been claimed by King Caliph, the most powerful alpha in the kingdom, and now there was no turning back. She entered the private chambers Caliph had prepared for her. The room was spacious, lined with tapestries depicting battles won and kingdoms conquered, yet it held a warmth from the hearth's fire that seemed almost alive. The flickering light danced across the walls, casting moving shadows that reminded her of the whispers from the auction hall, the ones that said she was weak, cursed, unworthy. But here Caliph had claimed her. Here she had a place, even if she did not yet understand why. Caliph was already there, standing by the tall window that overlooked the icy courtyard. His dark hair framed a face of sharp angles, and his eyes were fixed on the night beyond, unreadable as stone. He turned as she entered, and for a moment the air between them felt charged like lightning before a storm. "You are awake earlier than I expected," he said, his voice smooth but firm. "Did the night trouble you?" Seraphine hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. I cannot sleep well," she admitted quietly. "So much is new and so many eyes are on me." Caliph's gaze softened ever so slightly, though it remained intense. "That is because you are not merely an Omega. You are necessary. The court will test you, the nobles will challenge you, and you must endure." She lowered her eyes. "I am not strong. I do not know if I can survive this." "Strength is not always visible," Caliph replied, stepping closer. His presence was immense, almost overwhelming. "And survival is not the same as living fully. You must learn to wield the power inside you, even if it frightens you, even if you do not yet understand it." Seraphine shivered at his words. There was something in Caliph that both terrified and fascinated her. He was a man of rules, of power, of control. But there was also a depth beneath it, a loneliness and burden that whispered to her like a soft wind. She did not understand why he had chosen her, yet she could not deny the pull she felt toward him, a pull stronger than fear. "Come," Caliph said suddenly, motioning for her to follow. "I will show you the ways of the palace. You must know its dangers if you are to survive here." They walked together through the long corridors, past guards who bowed their heads at the king's command. Seraphine noticed the subtle glances of the palace staff, some curious, some wary, all aware of the shift in her life. She could feel their judgment, the weight of expectation, but Caliph's presence was like a shield, quieting the murmurs and giving her the courage to hold her head high. The first lesson came swiftly. Caliph led her to the council chamber, where nobles sat in anticipation of the morning briefing. Their eyes, sharp and calculating, fell on Seraphine the moment she entered. A few whispered under their breath, their words sharp like knives, but Caliph's gaze swept over them and they faltered. "Seraphine," Caliph said, his voice echoing in the chamber, "you will observe, you will learn, and you will understand the power of knowledge. The strength of the mind is as important as the strength of the body. Never forget this." She nodded, trying to steady her shaking hands. She had never been in a room like this, where every glance, every word carried weight. She realized quickly that this world was not kind to weakness, and that surviving required both courage and cunning. As the day passed, Caliph guided her through the palace, teaching her the history of the Northern Kingdom, the alliances and rivalries, the unspoken rules of power. With each lesson, Seraphine felt a growing awareness of the life she had stepped into, a life filled with danger, responsibility, and possibility. She began to see the subtle ways Caliph wielded influence, how his presence alone could command obedience, respect, and even fear. Yet it was not only the lessons of power that occupied her thoughts. It was Caliph himself. He was both distant and close, commanding and yet attentive, his eyes often finding hers in moments that left her heart racing. She tried to ignore it, to remind herself that he was the king and she was the Omega, but the truth was undeniable. She was drawn to him, even as fear and uncertainty lingered. That night, Caliph summoned her to the moonlit garden, a secluded terrace overlooking the frozen river. The moon hung low in the sky, silver and pale, casting a glow over the snow-laden branches. Seraphine wrapped her cloak tightly around her, shivering from more than just the cold. Caliph was already there, standing beneath an ancient oak whose branches stretched like skeletal arms toward the sky. His eyes, dark and intense, studied her as she approached. "You are learning quickly," he said, "but knowledge alone is not enough. You must also understand yourself, your fears, your desires, your strength, all of it." She swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. The garden was silent except for the distant rush of the river and the whisper of the wind through the branches. I do not know if I am strong," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I do not know what is inside me." Caliph stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. "Strength is not always visible. Sometimes it is hidden until it must be revealed. You have something inside you, Seraphine, a power that even you do not understand, and it calls to me, though I cannot yet control it." Seraphine's heart raced. His words were both terrifying and intoxicating. She wanted to deny them, to tell herself she was weak, unworthy, invisible. But there was a spark in Caliph's gaze, a recognition of something in her that she had never seen in anyone else. "You are not alone," he said softly, his voice carrying a weight that made her shiver. "I will guide you, I will protect you, but you must also be ready to face the truths of this world and the truths inside yourself." A strange warmth rose in her chest, a mixture of fear and longing, of trust and uncertainty. She wanted to run, to hide, yet she also wanted to stay, to learn, to prove herself, not just to the court but to the man who had claimed her. Caliph reached out, brushing a lock of hair from her face. The gesture was gentle, almost intimate, and yet it carried the same authority as his command. "Do not mistake my claim for pity," he said. "You are not here because you are weak. You are here because you are necessary, and because I see what others cannot." Seraphine's breath caught. She wanted to speak, to ask why, but no words came. All she could do was meet his gaze, feeling the pull of something deep and ancient, a bond that seemed older than the palace itself, a connection that both frightened and captivated her. The night stretched on, filled with silence and unspoken words. Seraphine walked beside Caliph through the garden, their steps crunching softly in the snow. The cold air bit at her cheeks, but it was nothing compared to the heat of her own thoughts, the storm of emotion swirling within her. Finally, Caliph stopped beneath the great oak. He turned to her, his eyes reflecting the moonlight, dark and unreadable. "Tomorrow, your training begins in earnest," he said. "You will learn the strength of your body as well as your mind, and you will see that the world is not as simple as it seems." Seraphine nodded, feeling both excitement and dread. She knew her life had changed forever, that the man beside her was both a protector and a challenge, and that the path ahead would test her in ways she could not yet imagine. As she returned to her chambers that night, she felt the weight of Caliph's presence lingering, as if he had left a part of himself in the air around her. She could not shake the sense that everything was shifting, the palace, the kingdom, and herself. And deep in her heart, a question echoed, persistent and unrelenting. What is the power within me, and why does the king seek it? In the quiet hours before dawn, as the palace slept, Seraphine dreamed of shadows and whispers, of fire and ice, of a destiny that was both terrifying and irresistible. She awoke with a start, her body tense, her mind alive with possibilities. The Northern Kingdom had claimed her, Caliph had claimed her, and she was no longer invisible. And yet, in the shadows beyond the palace walls, unseen eyes watched, filled with hunger and dark intent. A voice whispered, cold and patient, "She belongs to him, but she will not remain untouched. The power within her awakens, and it will change everything." The frost of dawn crept through the windows, and Seraphine knew, with a certainty she could not yet name, that the days ahead would test her, challenge her, and transform her. And with every step, she felt the pull of Caliph's presence, strong and unyielding, a chain both binding and freeing her in ways she could not yet understand. The Northern Kingdom was quiet at dawn, the frost shimmering like silver across the palace grounds. Seraphine stood on the balcony of her chambers, her fingers gripping the cold stone railing. The message from the rival kingdom had been delivered early, the words etched in black ink on thick parchment. "The king has claimed the Omega, but not all forces will bow to him. Prepare for the storm." Her heart raced. She did not fully understand the threat, yet she felt its weight pressing down on her like a storm cloud. Even Caliph, the Alpha King who seemed unshakable, had read the message and studied it with narrowed eyes, his jaw tight with tension. "Do you understand what this means?" Caliph asked, standing behind her. His voice was calm, but his dark eyes betrayed a spark of worry. Seraphine shook her head. "No, not fully, but I can feel it. Something is coming." Caliph's gaze softened for a brief moment, and he reached out, placing a firm hand on her shoulder. "You are right to feel it. There are forces beyond this kingdom that do not wish for peace. And your presence, your power, it is part of that balance. That is why they fear you, Seraphine." She flinched slightly at the word power. Until now, she had thought of herself as fragile, weak, easily overlooked. But Caliph's words planted a seed of something new, something frightening, but also exhilarating. A hidden strength, something dormant within her that she had never fully acknowledged. "I don't know if I can control it," she whispered, her voice trembling. "What if it destroys everything?" Caliph turned to face her, his expression serious. "That is why you must learn. Power, like any weapon, is dangerous when uncontrolled. But with guidance it can protect, it can heal, and it can even change destinies." Seraphine's thoughts swirled. She wanted to trust him, to believe in the strange bond forming between them, but fear still lurked like a shadow in her mind. What if I fail? What if I bring ruin to him, to the kingdom, to myself? Before she could speak, the distant toll of the palace bell echoed through the halls. The day had begun, and with it, her first true test. Caliph led her to the training grounds, a vast courtyard lined with stone walls and the banners of the Northern Kingdom. Warriors moved with precision, their movements sharp and deliberate, while Caliph observed every detail. "You will begin with control," Caliph explained, guiding her to the center of the courtyard. "Control of your body, your mind, and the energy within you. The Omega's strength is not always visible, but it is potent. It can be used to protect, to heal, or to strike when necessary." Seraphine nodded, trying to steady her breathing. She felt exposed under the gaze of the soldiers, the courtiers, and Caliph himself. Every misstep, every falter, seemed magnified in the crisp morning air. Yet, there was something in Caliph's presence that steadied her, a silent encouragement that went beyond words. Her first attempts were clumsy. She tried to summon even the smallest spark of her hidden energy, but nothing happened. Frustration and doubt threatened to overtake her. Caliph watched silently, his eyes dark with thought. "Focus not on the power itself," he said finally. "Focus on your intention. Your energy will follow the heart that directs it. Do not fear it. Embrace it." She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. She thought of the palace, of the king who had claimed her, of the whispers that had tormented her all her life. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, she felt a warmth spreading from her chest, a glow beneath her skin. The air around her seemed to hum faintly like a distant melody. Caliph stepped closer, his voice soft but steady. "Good. Do not push it too far. Let it grow naturally. Hours passed. Seraphine's control grew with each attempt, the glow inside her strengthening. She began to feel a strange connection to the palace itself, the walls, the wind, even the snow that clung to the frozen gardens. Her energy seemed to respond to her emotions, flaring brighter with determination, dimming with hesitation. By late afternoon, a test arrived that neither she nor Caliph had anticipated. A sudden roar echoed across the courtyard. The sound was unnatural, harsh, and full of anger. Soldiers dropped their training swords and shields, their eyes wide with fear. From the edge of the palace grounds, a shadow moved, a dark, twisted figure, faster and stronger than any human. Caliph's eyes narrowed. "Stay back," he commanded, drawing his sword. His movements were fluid, precise, but even he did not strike immediately. Instead, he studied the figure as if measuring its strength, its intent. Seraphine's heart pounded. She felt the power within her surge, responding to the threat. She did not understand it fully, yet she could sense the energy flowing outward from her, wrapping the courtyard in a faint silver glow. The figure moved closer, its shadow-like form twisting and shimmering. It did not speak, but its presence carried a weight that made the air itself feel heavy. Caliph's sword clashed against the figure's shadowy form, sparks flying as the energy between them collided. "Now, Seraphine," Caliph shouted, his eyes meeting hers. "Do not fear it. Use it." Her hands shook, but she reached out, focusing on the glow within her. The energy flared, expanding outward in a wave of silver light. The shadow recoiled, as if struck by an invisible force. The courtyard trembled and snow swirled around them in a sudden whirlwind, caught up in the power of her awakening. The shadow hissed, retreating, but it was not defeated. It lurked at the edge of the courtyard, its form flickering like smoke in the wind. Caliph sheathed his sword and approached Seraphine, his gaze intense but approving. "You did well," he said, his voice low. "But this is only the beginning. Your power is growing faster than I expected, but there are others who will seek to claim it for themselves. You must be ready." Seraphine's chest heaved. Fear, exhilaration, and uncertainty swirled together. For the first time, she realized that she was no longer the weak Omega everyone had rejected. She had a power within her that could shape the world, or destroy it if she failed to control it. That evening, Caliph led her to the moonlit tower, a high spire where the oldest records of the northern kingdom were kept. The spiral staircase wound upward, narrow and steep, the air growing thinner with every step. Seraphine clutched the railing, her legs trembling from exhaustion and the lingering adrenaline of the courtyard encounter. At the top, they entered a chamber filled with scrolls and ancient tomes. The walls were etched with glowing runes, old magic that pulsed faintly in the candlelight. Caliph gestured for her to sit at a large oak table. "This tower holds knowledge older than the kingdom itself," he explained. "And you, Seraphine, are connected to it more than anyone knows. Your awakening is tied to these forces. You must learn the history, the magic, and the responsibility that comes with it." She leaned forward, tracing her fingers over the worn pages of a scroll. Symbols seemed to shimmer and move beneath her touch. She could feel the energy within her responding to them, a rhythm, a connection she could not yet explain. Caliph watched her silently. For a moment the king seemed distant, almost vulnerable, as if the weight of the kingdom rested solely on his shoulders. "You will not always understand what is happening," he said quietly, "but trust yourself and trust what you feel. Your power is tied to your heart, and your heart is what will guide you." Hours passed as she studied, the glow within her flickering in rhythm with the runes. Slowly she began to understand fragments of her strength, how it responded to emotion, how it could influence the world around her, how it could both protect and defend. By midnight, she was exhausted, but she felt a strange exhilaration. For the first time in her life, she understood that she was not weak. She was necessary, chosen, and capable of things she had never imagined. As she prepared to leave the tower, Caliph's voice stopped her. "One more thing," he said, his dark eyes locking onto hers. "The shadow you face today, it is only the beginning. There are forces that will come for you, and they will not hesitate to harm anyone you care about. You must grow stronger, faster than they anticipate." Seraphine nodded, a mix of fear and determination in her chest. "I will try," she said softly. Calith's gaze softened almost imperceptibly. "You will not merely try, you will succeed because you must." Outside, the snow fell softly, blanketing the palace in silence. Yet the shadows beyond the walls moved with intent. Eyes watched from the darkness, whispering promises of chaos and power. The northern kingdom had never known a winter so harsh. Snow blanketed the black stone walls of the palace, frost clinging to every window, every spire, every banner. The air was crisp and sharp, filled with the scent of pine, firewood, and something more, an electric tension that made the hairs on Seraphine's arms rise. She stood on the balcony of the moonlit tower, her cloak wrapped tightly around her shoulders. Below, the courtyard stretched in silence, but she could feel it. A presence moving through the shadows, dark and patient, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The message from the rival kingdom had been only the beginning. The shadow that had attacked the courtyard days before now gathered strength, and Seraphine knew the final confrontation was near. Calith joined her, silent as always, his dark cloak brushing the snow at his feet. He placed a firm hand on her shoulder, and she felt the same mixture of fear and security she had felt the first night he claimed her. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice low, calm, but carrying the weight of command. Seraphine swallowed hard. I think so," she said, though her voice trembled. She could feel the power within her, pulsing and alive, responding to the danger beyond the walls. She had grown stronger, learned control, but the shadow was unlike anything she had faced before. Calith's dark eyes studied her face, and for a moment the king seemed less a ruler of the kingdom and more a man weighed down by the knowledge of what was to come. "Fear is natural," he said softly, "but you are not alone. Together, we will face this." The shadow attacked without warning. A gust of icy wind tore through the courtyard, knocking snow from the spires and sending the guards sprawling. The figure emerged from the darkness, a tall, twisted shape, eyes glowing like coals, form shifting and impossible to focus on. Its presence radiated malice, and the air around it seemed to chill to freezing. Calith drew his sword, the steel gleaming in the moonlight. "Seraphine, now," he commanded. Her hands flared with silver light, the power she had nurtured in the moonlit tower coursing through her veins. She focused, imagining the shadow's intent, its darkness, its hunger, and drew it toward her energy. The courtyard trembled as waves of silver light radiated from her, wrapping the shadow in a cocoon of pure force. The figure hissed, recoiling, but it did not retreat. It lunged, faster than Calith could strike, and the air exploded with energy as the clash began. Calith moved with precision, every swing of his sword meeting the shadow's attacks, yet it was Seraphine's power that held the balance. She felt it grow, responding not to fear, but to the certainty that she would protect the man who had claimed her, the kingdom she had begun to call home, and herself. The battle raged through the courtyard, sparks of silver light clashing with the shadow's black tendrils. Seraphine's heart pounded, but she focused, remembering Calith's lessons. Your energy follows your heart. Strength is born of intention. She drew a deep breath and extended her hands, summoning a shield of silver light that wrapped the shadow, pressing it back. "Calith, together," she shouted. He nodded, stepping forward, his sword slicing through the remaining darkness as she pushed her energy forward. The shadow shrieked, a sound like ice cracking, and it began to falter under their combined force. For the first time, Seraphine realized the truth Calith had seen from the beginning. She was not weak, she was necessary, she was powerful, and together they could overcome even the greatest threats. The shadow convulsed, its form flickering, and then it surged one final time, reaching toward Seraphine with dark tendrils. She hesitated for a fraction of a second, fear clawing at her, but Calith's voice cut through the doubt. "Do not falter. Use your heart." With a scream of determination, she let go of all fear. The silver light expanded, enveloping the shadow completely. For a moment, the courtyard was bathed in brilliant radiance, so bright that the snow seemed to sparkle like stars. When the light faded, the shadow was gone, dissipated into nothingness, leaving only the echo of its hiss in the wind. Calith stepped closer to her, his hand brushing hers. "You did it," he said, his voice full of awe and pride. "You controlled it. You saved us." Seraphine's knees trembled as she sank to the ground, exhausted but triumphant. I never knew I could," her words trailed off, overwhelmed by emotion. Calith knelt beside her, placing a hand on her cheek. "You are stronger than you realize. And you will only grow stronger." His gaze held hers, intense and unwavering. For a moment, the world outside the palace walls seemed to vanish, leaving only the two of them, bound by battle, destiny, and something deeper, something unspoken. The aftermath was quiet. Soldiers and guards emerged from hiding, bowing low to the king and to Seraphine. The palace seemed to breathe again, the tension easing, though the memory of the shadow lingered like a warning. Calith guided Seraphine back to the moonlit tower, his presence steadying her, silent acknowledgement of her courage. Once inside, Calith poured them both tea, and they sat by the fire in silence. The warmth seeped into her bones, and she allowed herself to finally relax. Her hand still glowed faintly with residual energy, a reminder of the power she now carried within her. "You were magnificent," Calith said finally, breaking the silence. His voice was softer now, almost vulnerable. "I have never seen such control, such focus from anyone." "Not even me." Seraphine looked at him, a mix of awe and curiosity in her eyes. "Why me?" she whispered. "Why did you choose me at the auction? I was nothing." Calith's gaze softened, a rare moment of openness. "You were everything they could not see. You were strength in disguise, courage in waiting, and power that others feared. I claimed you because I knew what they did not, and because I saw you." Her chest tightened, and she realized the truth of their bond. It was not just destiny, not just power. It was understanding, recognition, and trust. For the first time in her life, she felt seen, not as weak, but as whole. Days passed, and with each passing moment, Seraphine's confidence grew. She trained, studied, and learned to harness her energy with precision. Calith watched her, guiding her when necessary, challenging her when needed, but always with respect and care. Their bond deepened, forged in battle, trust, and shared purpose. Then came the final test. The rival kingdom had not retreated. Word came of an approaching army, dark banners waving in the wind, magic swirling among them. They had not forgotten the Omega who had been claimed, nor the Alpha who had defended her. Calith prepared the kingdom for defense, but Seraphine stepped forward. "I will help," she said firmly. "I can use my power. I can protect the people and the kingdom. We do not have to fight blindly." Calith studied her for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. "Very well. Together we will face this. But remember, you are as vital to this as I am. Trust yourself." The battlefield was cold, a mix of snow and dark magic, the air electric with tension. The rival army advanced, but Seraphine stood at Calith's side, her silver energy glowing brightly, a beacon of hope and strength. The two moved in perfect synchronization, Calith's steel, her energy, a harmony of power that few could match. The enemy's magic struck at them, dark tendrils of frost and shadow, but Seraphine met them with light, shielding both soldiers and Calith from harm. Every strike, every movement was precise, controlled, and confident. She felt no fear, only determination, courage, and the bond that tied her to Calith. Finally, with one last surge of combined force, the enemy faltered. Their dark magic unraveled, their banners collapsed, and they fled into the cold, leaving the northern kingdom victorious. The palace bells rang, echoing across the snow-covered lands, announcing the triumph of those who had fought for the kingdom's heart. In the aftermath, Caliph turned to Seraphine. "You have done more than survive," he said, his voice full of respect. "You have protected this kingdom and proven your strength." Seraphine smiled, exhausted but triumphant. "We did it together." Caliph reached out, taking her hand in his. "No," he said softly, a rare warmth in his dark eyes. "You did it. You became the Omega they could not see, and the Alpha chose wisely. You are extraordinary." The snow fell softly outside, covering the world in silver light. For the first time, Seraphine felt at peace. She had faced fear, embraced power, and discovered her true strength. Caliph had faced his own burdens, and together they had forged a bond stronger than fear, stronger than destiny. Final reflection. Seraphine understood that her journey was far from over. The world was full of shadows, rival kingdoms, and challenges yet to come. But she was no longer the weak Omega rejected by all. She was powerful, necessary, and finally, truly seen. And by her side, Caliph, the Alpha King, remained, her protector, her partner, and her equal in every way that mattered.